Good morning, everyone. Today is July 14th, 2022. If you're in France, like Natalie Armstrong-Motan, it's Bastille Day. So happy Bastille Day to Natalie and anybody else who may be in France, and happy summer to the rest of us. Today, it's the New Possibilities Hour, part of the Will Work for Food project, which Natalie founded in the spring of 2020. We present great webinars every Thursday morning, live at 8 o'clock Pacific, 11 o'clock Eastern. Topics of interest to mediators, arbitrators, lawyers, and anybody who negotiates. As everyone knows, there's no charge for these great webinars. Rather, we ask you to contribute to a food bank if you like what you see. And our audiences have been so generous in contributing to fight food insecurity in honor of our great speakers. One of the best parts of the webinar every week is when we announce the running total of just how much has been contributed. Jean Lawler, would you please do the honors?
Absolutely, with pleasure. For donations of which Natalie has been told, I always put that little asterisk there because we know it is more than this overall, $294,766.36. So fantastic. Thank you all.
That is just incredible generosity. Thank you all so much. And we're going to keep the ball rolling today. We've got a great presentation on whether mediators sell settlements in mediation using sales techniques. And we have two wonderful speakers from the great state of Texas, Aric Garza and Sylvia Mayer. Aric Garza is a highly effective and sought-after litigation lawyer who has established himself as one of the premier litigators in South Central Texas. He has a diverse practice in the areas of commercial and consumer litigation, real estate, and probate and estates. He's also a recognized arbitrator and mediator. Aric has extensive litigation experience, having represented both plaintiffs and defendants in multi-party cases for over 20 years. He's represented businesses, government entities, and individuals in cases such as consumer law claims involving colleges and universities, nonprofit corporation claims against multinational banks, individual claims against major franchises, breach of contract claims involving large and mid-sized companies, property claims against government entities, and cases involving class actions in bankruptcy adversarial litigation. As an arbitrator, Aric has been appointed over 100 times since 2014, including employment cases, B2B cases, and consumer claims totaling over 15 million in dispute. And as a mediator, Aric has successfully resolved numerous commercial disputes, consumer disputes, and real estate matters. Sylvia Mayer is an arbitrator, mediator, and attorney with nearly 30 years of legal experience in courts nationwide. As a member of the National Academy of Distinguished Neutrals and a TMCA credentialed advanced mediator, Sylvia serves on several arbitration and mediation rosters for civil, commercial, consumer, employment, and healthcare disputes. As an experienced neutral, Sylvia has served as arbitrator and mediator for disputes involving a wide variety of issues spanning a breadth of industries, including accounting, banking, bankruptcy, business, commercial, employment, energy, finances, financial markets, healthcare, insurance, oil and gas, personal injury, professional liability, securities, sureties, and telecommunications. And that's in alphabetical order. Prior to launching her solo law and ADR practice in 2014, Sylvia was a partner with Weil, Gottschall, and Manges, working on commercial bankruptcy and litigation matters and providing governance and financial advisory services. With nearly 30 years of legal experience, Sylvia Mayer offers experience, creativity, tenacity, and sincerity to help parties solve their problems. We're going to have a fantastic presentation today. We'd love to hear first about the food banks to which you would like people to direct contributions if they're in a position to do so, and then tell us about the use of sales techniques and whether mediators are selling settlement and mediation. Aric, Sylvia, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having us today. We are really excited to join you and thrilled with the turnout and looking forward to a great discussion. In terms of food banks, first, let me just pause to say kudos to you, to Jeff and Jean and Natalie for your incredible good work in trying to address food insecurity around the world. I always contribute when I participate in your programs as a listener, and I will make a donation today in recognition of having had the opportunity to present. I have designated the food bank here in Houston, the Houston Food Bank, because I am in Houston. And Aric, you want to talk a little bit about your designated food bank?
Absolutely. Thank you very much also for having me on, and thank you, Sylvia. Yes, food and the critical shortages that we find in resources in many urban communities begin with something very simple. It's just access to food and nutrition for some of the most vulnerable populations that we have, children, young mothers, and so forth. We can't thank you enough for that. I know the San Antonio Food Bank is one of the stellar organizations in the San Antonio community. And I'm just thankful that people would consider that a worthy cause. So thank you, Natalie.
All right, well, so with that, I'm going to take just a moment to put up my screen here. We have a little PowerPoint to go along with our discussion, and bear with me while I get it into. All right, so here we go. So today's discussion is about, do mediators sell settlement in mediation? And we'd like this to be an interactive discussion in two ways. One, you're going to see we're going to do some polls. We're going to ask for some input from you via a polling mechanism. The poll is designed to first give us a little understanding of who's in the audience, but also to explore this question of, do mediators sell settlement in mediation? And two, we invite you to add comments or questions in the chat. We won't be able to stop during the presentation and address those as we go. Certainly, we ask that if Natalie or Jean or Jeff see something that they think we should pause to address, please let us know. But we will try to reserve time at the end to come back and explore some of the things you have shared or any questions you may have asked. And so with that, let's just start with our first polling question. Could we get the first question, please? So the first question is just to help us understand a little bit about who you are. Tell us about yourselves. We're going to all get to see the results in real time. We'll wait just a couple of seconds to let people have a chance to answer so we can see who's with us today. So it looks like we have primarily ADR providers and attorneys or advocates, but it's exciting to see that we also have some folks from academia and people from other backgrounds. So thank you. So if we could switch to the second polling question, please. So this question really helps us understand for the ADR providers who are joining and the advocates or people who have perhaps just been a party, whether you're an advocate or an ADR provider, you've been a party to a mediation. What's your experience with mediation? You've done a lot, you've done some, you've done a gajillion. So it looks like we have a pretty varied experience level in terms of mediation, and that's fantastic. You know, we all learn as we go. It doesn't matter if you've done 1 mediation, 10 mediations, 100 or 100,000. At least for me, I keep learning every day. And I find that that's something that makes things interesting, is I love to learn every single day. And now we're going to go to polling question number 3. All right, so this polling question ties to our title. Do mediators sell settlements in mediation? And we wanted to ask this question now. We're going to ask it again at the end. Now, I will confess that we have framed this question a little bit vaguely. because the question could be asking, are we selling the fact that settlement is an option in mediation as we're marketing our business? Or are we literally selling something in the actual mediation itself? And I leave it to your interpretation. But it's just interesting to see what people think now, and we'll see what people think at the end. So we got 74% that say yes, 3 who say no. Oh, hold on, it's changing. 76 who say yes, 3% who say no, 21% undecided. So we'll revisit that at the end. All right, so we're ready for our next polling question.
Okay, well, let's see. That would be number 4. Okay. More specific, do mediators use sales techniques in sort of the type of techniques that you might encounter in someone who conducts sales altogether to help the parties settle in mediation? And we have, I think it's almost a foregone conclusion that it's yes. No one says no. So this will be an easy presentation, right, Sylvia? Well, we'll be talking about all aspects of it. We're all basically in agreement. Some people are undecided, so that's interesting to me. 17% are undecided. So I'll make a note of that. Let's go on to the next poll question. If you are a mediator, and most people were denoted, I believe that they were ADR professionals, as a mediator or in your work as a mediator, do you use any of the following? Which ones? Excellent. So pretty cut and right across the board, most people use some of the techniques we're going to talk about. And I think it's pretty interesting, 66% only exhibiting excellence or experience. And we'll talk about that in more detail, what that really means. But I think many will find themselves either having heard of that or using that or have seen it used in their mediations. So back to you, Sylvia.
All right, so that concludes the polling part. And all right, so we need to take the poll results off the screen.
1 second. They're still showing?
They are still showing.
Took them down. Natalie, do you have any idea how to fix this? I've taken them down.
I closed mine, so I don't see it any longer.
So I think everyone has to close for themselves.
All right, I clicked the X in the corner and it made mine go away. So it seems like this is an opportunity for party autonomy. Everybody needs to use their autonomy to close out the poll on their screen. And, you know, it's an interesting thing because party autonomy is an important part of mediation. And so here's your chance to exercise your autonomy. So I want to pause for a second before we move into the next set of slides to say that the genesis of today's discussion was a series of books that I read, which include, and then, you know, I realize it's hard to see on the screen, but which include a book called Persuasion, a book called Exactly What to Say, and a book called Negotiation Mythbusters. And I will say I highly recommend all 3. But I read those literally in the order that I just showed you. So Persuasion is the one that started me down this path. Persuasion is a book that is about how we persuade people, how we build receptivity to help them agree to things, to find resolution in the world of mediation but it's really written more from the perspective of persuasion and sales. So let me put my share
I'm
screen.
sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you need to share it again. Sorry.
There it goes. Okay, and so that led me into thinking, I'm going to do some research on sales techniques. And so we're going to go through a series of slides, which are literally just screenshots that I took of different sites that talk about different sales approaches. There's nothing to do with mediation, nothing to do with dispute resolution, although you'll see it has a lot to do with mediation and dispute resolution. So here we go. Here's the first one. This is a technique called SPIN selling. SPIN is an acronym standing for situation, problem, implication, and need payoff. But look at it a little more closely. Gather information, identify pains and problems, underscore what problems, what pains need to be solved. Lead them to conclude as such on their own. I wonder if any of those things apply to what we do in a mediation. Here's another approach, solution selling. I realize this is probably hard for y'all to read on the screen, but the primary 4 points for solution selling are ask the right questions, which is a form of gathering information, suggest a solution in terms of exploring ways to solve problems, have a game plan ready, meaning go into it thinking about what may be different ways you can solve a problem, and excellent product knowledge. Well, certainly we as mediators talk about our experience, but we also prepare for mediations. And during the course of the mediation, we may be sharing how we studied the information they provided in advance. Or we may be talking about our experience as a mediator, or our experience as an attorney, as a litigator, those kinds of things. Aric, you want to pick up on this one?
Absolutely. By the way, I would add that Sylvia did a great job in surveying different types of selling techniques that are prevalent out there, but not necessarily applicable to any particular product or service. So these are, we believe, generally recognized techniques that are used pervasively among various industries. What is snap selling? You may have heard this before. Keeping it simple. Making things easy and clear for your customers, not trying to sell it on its complicated nature or what it's about. Ensuring that you convey to the customer that the product or service is invaluable. So being invaluable, stand out as the person that your customers can't live without. And that's of selling yourself really as someone who has merit to what they're saying. There was a poll question earlier about experience and excellence as an aspect of one of the parts of in a mediation, whether that's a technique that's used. That's akin to saying, maybe I'm a judge and I've had many of these cases, or I've mediated thousands of cases, and this is how it turns out. If you stand out as the person that is the foremost, let's say, loosely expert in an area, then customers trust you more and they believe that you know more about the situation. Aligning yourself, always aligning. Make sure you're in sync with your customers' objectives and issues. And raising priorities. What are the most important aspects of the decision-making in the customer's mind? What is it that their agenda is? What are their objectives? So mastering those techniques supposedly lead to better sales. And that's one methodology. So let's go to the next slide. Challenger selling, leverage construction tension. These are the skills that they teach in other areas. So let's go on to those. Challengers give insights to reframing. Think about that term. Reframing how clients think about their business. Maybe they think about it a certain way. Maybe you can help them reframe how they think about it, offering a solution that you know about. Challengers in this particular, with this particular type of sales approach, tailor their pitch specifically to the stakeholders, those making the decisions, as well as those who have the most to gain from the outcome, and allowing them to win over multiple stakeholders. Challengers in this particular scenario, they stand firm and push back on clients' requests in a non-aggressive way. Many mediators you might see use those somewhat techniques, standing firm, pushing back. Challengers also offer insights and hypotheses to address clients' risk aversion. Risk aversion to what? Risk aversion perhaps to to avoid an unwanted situation, and to help nudge them, really, to move them forward. So let's go ahead and go on to the next slide then. So as you could see, and we can go back to these slides, that what mediators tend to do in these situations, and especially in very, very difficult emotional types of highly emotional mediations, is they use the same techniques. They ask, they gather, they identify. What that requires, some of the skills and characteristics of a good mediator who tries to hone those, whether they know it or not, sales techniques, they exercise curiosity. Tone and expression are extremely important. You are the mediator, after all. You're not a litigant. It's one of the things that you have to kind of tone down when you are a litigator who handles mediations. Your body language, and all important in the era of the pandemic and in mediations. Many of us have handled mediations, many mediations by Zoom. Some people say that deprives them of the ability to read and interpret body language. I say no. I say that I think we could still gather a lot from what we see in the context of Zoom mediations. Your word choice, careful thought and consideration as to what words to use. Same thing as sales, same thing with mediation. And the hidden signals, reading between the lines, using your experience as a litigator and or mediator to read and to determine what you think is really being said or done. Of course, we can't read minds. That would be the perfect mediator, but we look for the hidden signals. And so you see the overlap, you see the correlation between some of the sales techniques that Sylvia has located and found and we've discussed, and that with what a mediator does. So what do we do in the end, at the end of the day? What is that allows us to become effective mediators and to help people resolve problems? You have to build rapport, you have to build a connection, you have to build trust, in essence. And many mediators do it, of course, in different ways, but I would submit to you, and what we're basically submitting to you today, is that sales techniques, not gimmicky, not so gimmicky or anything like that, they're basically tools that we use to build rapport, trust, and connect with the stakeholders in the mediation to help resolve their disputes. Some would submit that it's really difficult to do that in the context of a mediation in a short period of time on a one-day level. Certainly by Zoom offers certain challenges, but these techniques, if used and used carefully and developed and honed and maybe even crafted a little bit, will aid you if you are an ADR professional in helping at least to address issues that heretofore you may not have been able to address very well, or it at least offers alternatives to those traditional approaches to resolving disputes. Okay, so reframing it is a technique that mediators use often, and it's one of the techniques we discussed in the polling question, but different mediators use different techniques to reframe, which is the term that we use. But let's talk about how we define that. And so Sylvia and I will just kind of, both of us, discuss that. Sylvia, when we talk about reframing, let's make sure we're all on the same page. What do you mean when you see that? What do you think when you think the word of reframing in the context of a mediation? What do you think that means?
So I think you can use reframing in a lot of different ways, but at root, reframing is a way to either help someone understand something differently or to help them rephrase something in a different manner. So I see it, I use it a lot in mediation, really in 3 different ways. One, if I have a party who is super, super aggressive. And so when I say, tell me what you want me to share with the other side, we're doing this in a caucus setting and I'm visiting with them. And I say, I want you to give me information to share with the other side to help them start to see things differently. And they come back to me with something like, well, you tell them I'm going to pound them into the ground. They're going to be pulp when this is over. And here I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to do the other. And so then I say, okay, all right, well, so let me just see if I can help you reframe that. And a lot of times in that context, I'll use the word and I'll say, because what we want to do is share this information in a manner that'll help them get to a place where they're willing to settle with you. What if instead I said, and then I put it in words that are slightly more gentle, but still convey the same underlying message of, I'm going to win on this particular legal point, or this particular factual point, there is no dispute, or whatever the underlying message was. And 99% of the time they say, yes, that's what I want you to say. So I have helped them reframe or rephrase the communication.
That's what I meant. That's what they'll tell you.
Yeah. Well, but I also use it the other way around. I use it as a way to reframe what they're seeing or what they're hearing. So I may come in and say, the other side counter offer is these 5 points. And their response is totally negative. I'm finished, I'm done. They're not negotiating in good faith. I'm sure we all hear this. And then they say, absolutely, that number 1 and 2 on that list are things that we cannot do. And so then I'll say, all right, that's fair enough. 1 and 2 don't work for you. But 3, 4, and 5 are the things that you told me you needed in order to make this settlement work. And they've agreed to them now. So let's maybe look at this a little differently. We can reframe it to see that there is a potential path to resolution here. And then the third way that I use reframing is where these 4 words that are on the page come in. They are ways that I reframe the situation to try and open their eyes to new opportunities. So let's use if. If I use a lot of times when there's some barrier to resolution, and I will say, if we can solve for that, then what would you want? What would you like the outcome to be? Because if I know where people, each side or all sides, if it's a multi-party dispute, are looking to go once we get past the insurmountable obstacle, there may be a way to find a creative solution to solve for what everybody thought was an insurmountable obstacle. Similarly, imagine. Imagine is a great word to use when what could most help them get over the hump, get to a place where they're open to resolution, is to appreciate what life would be like when this is behind them. So imagine what it would feel like if this litigation was over. Imagine what closure would feel like. Imagine how it would help your business as you move forward if you didn't have this distraction. And that ties into the 4th word on the page, which is closure, because that word closure really can be very powerful to parties in many cases. And good news, this is one of my favorites. A lot of times people will say to me, we don't agree on anything. And then I'll say, well, that's interesting. Because as I understand it, y'all disagree about a lot of things, but you agree on, and then I'll rattle off 10 things where everybody's in agreement. So good news, you actually agree on most of the facts in this case. There's 2 facts you have a disagreement over, and those may be important facts, but there's a lot that you agree on. And so I use good news as a way to try and shift their mindset, to reframe, so that we can start finding something positive. All right, so I just did a lot of talking. Aric, how do you
That's
use?
okay. Well, excellent. First of all those things I think are very, very excellent techniques, and they, you know, they move the mediation forward. They address obstacles and challenges that every mediation encounters, and every mediator certainly has encountered. I think along the lines, I think innately, and this is a little bit of background, even after that very long opening biography that was read, I come from a sales family. My father was a salesman, for many, many years. He was a very, very good salesman, and he just did it innately. Many of us use sales techniques in our own practices just on a daily basis. Certainly, if you're someone who's trying to rainmake or get clients, who's the product? You've got to pitch yourself in a certain way. And in order to do that, I think you have to develop excellent communication skills, of course. But the ability to see what the issue is that the person has in front of you and be able to address it. Oftentimes, as in a mediation, they have to be, people have to be sort of, I would say, rerouted in a way, because in a difficult situation with a law firm, as we all know, and I'm certainly someone who handles a certain type of case, people are in a very, very different emotional state. When they're looking for a product, or there's a need that they're looking to fill, a void, if you will. And it doesn't necessarily help just to say how good this thing is, and this will help resolve the problem. What you have to do is, going back to the slide of building rapport and trust, and doing it in a very short period of time, requires, I think personally, for you to give something of yourself, for you to allow people to see who you are, and maybe to give them some insight into who you are as not just an attorney, or a mediator, but as a person, as a human being. Only then, as the groundwork, can we reframe issues, in my opinion, because if they don't identify with you, if they don't agree with you, if they don't share the same communication style with you, oftentimes a lot of the subsequent messages will be lost. So using these techniques, I think, are grounded upon a foundation of trust and rapport that we've established already. So reframing comes with a foundation you have to set. Reframing it, saying, trust me that I'm telling you, imagine if, or imagine this, or here's the good news, belies the fact that you've developed that rapport and trust with them. So what I do is I put a lot of time and effort in my mediations on developing that part first, developing some credibility with all of the parties, the attorneys, the parties themselves. Then I can say, imagine this, or here's the good news, or closure. So if you think about it, these are sales techniques in a way, because they're not just words that we use. They are, Sylvia Mayer is telling me this, and I trust her, and I like her, and I know she won't steer me wrong. So if she tells me, reimagine this situation in a different way, I'm going to say, this is Sylvia Mayer telling me this. This is Natalie Armstrong telling me this. I like these people. I trust them. They won't steer me wrong. So the reframing technique is, I think, is just the emphasis would be on using that in conjunction with the development of rapport and credibility. So so talking about the techniques that Sylvia and how she does it in particular, absolutely, it's going to carry a lot of weight. And that's, I like the notion of how to handle aggressive parties in a mediation, and how she uses very skillfully a technique that conveys the same message, but reframes it in a certain way that conveys the same message, but says it in a different way that's more palatable for the other side to take. How does she do that? She uses her skill and experience in doing it. And really, they have to trust her inherently, because they don't know what she's going to say in the other room. And sometimes, she's going to call an audible. So I try to use the same techniques that Sylvia does, just knowing in the back of my mind that what's incredibly important is that I have to have a very good grasp of the situation in terms of the relationships that the people have with each other, my relationship with the parties and the attorneys.
All right, well, so I do want to just give one quick shout out, which is the 4 words on this page. They came from this book, exactly what to say. So when I read that book, I realized they were words I'd been using. And it was something that continued to really open my eyes to how much we use sales techniques, because exactly what to say is all about sales and how much we use sales techniques as mediators. And so that takes us into talking about reciprocity. I mentioned earlier that the first book that really started me down this path of thinking about how do I as a mediator utilize sales techniques in a mediation was reading Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. And I definitely recommend that book to everyone. And one of the principles of his book that he talks about is the rule of reciprocity. So what is reciprocity? Reciprocity is those who have given benefits to us are entitled to benefits from us in return. It's something that we learn as small children, and it's something that's universal. You see reciprocity in cultures all around the world. So think about 2 little kids who are maybe playing Legos together, and one kid has 2 blue and the other kid has 2 green Legos, and they each need one of the other color. So one says, I'll give you my blue Lego if you'll give me your green Lego. That's a very, very simplistic example of reciprocity. One gives, the other gives something in return. So how does this then play out in a mediation? Well, the most simplistic example of it is, how often do you have parties who say in a mediation, I'm going to make a big move now, and I expect the other side to reciprocate? Reciprocity. All right, now we're going to talk in a minute about receptivity. And so I'm going to pause on that example for a second, because I'm going to come back to it. But in Cialdini's book, he provides a lot of real life examples of how reciprocity plays out day to day. How often do you go to the grocery store and they have samples? Well, why do they have samples? They have samples because deeply ingrained in us is the idea that if we walk past the person who has the cheese and crackers and we take a free sample of cheese and crackers and we like it, some subconscious level, we're then going to buy those cheese and crackers, and they will conveniently have them on a cart right next to it, right? So that it makes it easier for us to buy. Another example that he gives is somebody did a study of stores that sell chocolate. And the chocolate stores found that if they give out free samples of chocolate when customers enter the store, then those customers are 42% more likely to buy chocolates before they leave the store. That's reciprocity. And so if you think about us as mediators, so forget the parties using reciprocity, how do we as mediators use reciprocity? Well, for those of you who either continued through the pandemic or have returned to, or prior to the pandemic, did in-person mediations, I know some people are fully online and have always been online. How often did you say, please help yourself to some coffee, or get a snack, or a soft drink, or you provide them lunch? Well, that's reciprocity, because you are giving them something. And what you're going to get in return is that they feel comfortable, they feel connected, they feel safe in your mediation. You also see reciprocity play out in the concept of bracketing, which is something that comes up in some mediations. Because really underlying bracketing is, if you do this, if you give, then you will get this in return. So you see reciprocity in a lot of places. All right, now I'm going to digress from the books I've read to share a quote that really leaped out at me when I was watching the TV show Billions. Now, I happen to be late to joining the party of watching the show, so I'm watching seasons that are long past. And for those who don't know, the character Chuck Rhodes, at least at the time that he made this comment, was the district attorney for the Southern District of New York. And he says to somebody, the best way to bond with someone isn't doing them a favor, but asking for one. And that quote just hit me like a ton of bricks. Why? How often do we say in the mediation, in the beginning of the mediation, I ask that you give the process a chance. It is very likely that when we get to the point of exchanging offers, the first proposal the other side gives is going to be something that you don't like, that you really have a lot of concerns about. It may be something that makes you think you should leave, but I ask that you give the process a chance. Can you do me a favor and commit that you'll stay and try and give the process a chance? The Rule of Indebtedness. I came up with that title, so you're not going to find that anywhere else. But I started thinking about it and I thought, how often do we do that? And that's the thing that gets them to stay. That's the thing that gets them not to walk away. Or we make a commitment to them that we are going to stay with them. We connect, but we ask them to do us the favor of making that commitment back. The Rule of Indebtedness. We ask for a favor, and in exchange, we're bonding with them. We're getting something in return. Timing and receptivity. All right, so this is one of my favorite topics. So I'm going to attempt not to go on and on and on and on about this, but let me go back to the example I gave when we were talking about reciprocity, where one party says, I'm going to make a really big move and I expect the other side to do it, to do the same. Sometimes that fails. Why does that fail? The other side is not receptive. They have not reached the point of receptivity. Receptivity is really the theme that underlines Cialdini's book on persuasion. Everything that he talks about in that book is about the things that you can do so that the other side becomes receptive to your ask, so that the other side is ready to make concessions, is ready to move towards you in your negotiation. In the context of mediation, is ready to move towards resolution or settlement or compromise. And timing is deeply connected to receptivity, because until someone is receptive, it is not the right time to expect them to agree. It does not mean it's not the right time to push and pull and ask and inquire, be curious, but it's not the right time for them to accept because they're not receptive yet. So how do we get somebody to the point of receptivity? Well, it's basically all the things that we've been talking about and more. We use trust building tools. We use trust building tools to connect with people so that they feel a connection with us, so that they can open up and they can share with us. They feel safe. We use trust building tools to create a sense of safety. We also use the mediation process to confirm that each side has the power of consent. And why is that so important? Because the power of consent is another path to feeling safe. And feeling safe is needed in order to get to resolution. So the power of consent comes into play because they say no. First party offers X. Second party says, no, I'll offer Y. Third party says, no, but I'll offer Z. And you go back and forth. And so they have this power of consent. I often say to people, no one comes to mediation until they've heard the word no, right? They don't need me until somebody said no. So they've already walked in the door exercising their power of consent. And then I just reaffirm that power of consent as we're going back and forth and working through the process. So a big tool that we use to build receptivity is trust building. Another very common tool that we use as mediators to help with receptivity is validation or empathy. How often do you have a party who who needs to share their story. They need someone to hear it and to empathize with them as they share it. They need the validation of having someone say, wow, that was really hard. Oh, I feel your pain. I'm so sorry you went through that. I can think of many examples from my mediation where the thing that allowed us to get to resolution was that I was able to connect with somebody, provide them an empathic listener, and validate that their underlying hurt makes sense to me. It's real. And that then opens the door to receptivity. Reality testing, another thing a lot of us do as mediators. We do reality testing. Somebody says X, Y, and Z. My position is X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to win on all those things. So then we reality test that. Well, let's talk about this. You say this and they say that on this particular legal issue, and y'all have pending motions for summary judgment. And you told me the reason that you're here is you wanted to try to settle the case before the judge rules on that issue. So maybe each side is here because no one knows how the judge is going to rule on that issue. That's just an example. But you do lots of reality testing, and how often do people say, oh, this is a jury trial? Well, a jury trial is a roll of the dice. So you may feel that you have a compelling case on the facts and the law, but until you play it out in front of a jury, you don't know what that jury is going to think. So we do different types of reality testing. Reframing, which we've already talked about. We use our experience. So we talk about, well, I can't guarantee you what the results will be in this case, but I've tried 45 cases where a similar issue was at stake, and here's my experience. Or I've never dealt with this specific issue that you have, but I've been in front of your judge a gajillion times, and here's my experience with that judge and how they deal with these types of issues. So there's a lot of different tools that we use to help parties become receptive. And it really, a lot of us as mediators go on instinct in terms of when does receptivity happen, because it's not something that like you don't literally cartoon style see a light bulb go off over their head and now this is the moment. It's more of a progress. It's a progression of getting someone from absolutely not to from the no that they were at when they walked in the door to the settlement that they have at the end. And somewhere in that process, they reached the point where they were receptive. And that receptivity allowed you to find a path to resolution. All right. This is
Sylvia, before we go on there, can we go back to the sales technique? Having heard all that, go back to the sales technique called SNAP.
Sure. All right, everybody, hold on. We're getting ready to scroll really fast. Nope. SNAP.
There you go. Now, those of you that heard Sylvia mention what she just talked about, keeping it simple. This is, of course, in a sales technique, but you understand how mediators, using all of the things that Sylvia mentioned, for example, always align, making sure you're in sync with your customer's objectives. That's empathy. The empathy that's used to be true empathy, in my opinion, is not something that can be feigned or bought and sold or whatever. You either feel it or you don't. And I think most people on a certain level, I don't mean everyone, but most people on a certain level can sense if you are merely just trying to say that versus whether you actually feel it. If I hear Sylvia saying all of those things, all of those techniques that she utilizes, and inherently, I think Sylvia, although a great lawyer, would have been a great salesperson as well. Just innately being able to use those skills are invaluable, of course, to getting the parties to resolve a matter. becoming it's telling them about the solution, that they have to move forward with the solution, being invaluable about it, keeping it simple so that they can understand, which is to me akin to reframing a situation where people see it through their own lens, and you keep it simple, make it clear to them. And always keeping those on the priority side, raising priorities, keeping those most important decisions on the forefront of their mind, and not letting them lose track of the sense of the idea that resolution and closure are extremely powerful in the context of certainly a sales issue, but incredibly important in a mediation to getting people to resolve. So I just wanted to tie that back in. Thank you very much we have a little bit of time, so I thought I'd just tie that back in because I thought there were excellent points that you made there, Sylvia.
Absolutely. I think you will find, and in fact, I think it's good that we did this. I'm going to go back. So let me scroll back to the first one we did. I think you're going to find that each of these contain things that we do as mediators. So if you didn't pick up on that the first time we went through, I think now it's really clear. You know, we gather information, we identify the pains and problems, we underscore why those pains need to be solved and lead them to conclusions on their own. We ask questions, suggest solutions, show our excellent product knowledge, have a game plan. We reframe, we tailor what we're saying to different parties. And I will say that's a really key to receptivity, is we're always trying to tailor to who our audience is, what we're saying. So, you know, if you have a person who is very emotional, empathy may work. If you have a person who is not, they don't need empathy. They need some other skill set. And so always tailor your style. And so now let me go back to, balance. Balance is critically important as a mediator. It is critically important both in terms of the actual settlement, because in order to get from the no they were at when they walked in the door to the deal they hopefully reach before they walk out the door, you have to balance their competing interest. And so you're helping them work through that in mediation. You're using all of these different techniques that we have explored to help them find some way to balance their competing interests so that they can have a resolution, so they can reach an agreement. But it is incumbent upon us as mediators to bring another balance to this equation. We cannot be so fixated on our desire to get the parties to settlement that we lose our integrity. So we as mediators have to balance the parties' autonomy. Circling back to the comment I made at the beginning with the polling question, I said exercise your party autonomy. We have to balance their need for party autonomy, their power of consent and ability to say no, and our desire to help them find a settlement. We can't force them somewhere. All we can do is try to help them see new opportunities, to probe, to support, to validate, to reframe, to use all of our skills and our tools to help them find a way to balance their competing needs, to try and find a settlement or a path to resolution. But we really, really, as mediators, have to use our integrity and not go over the edge and force someone, try to manipulate or get someone into a settlement that is not something that they would have otherwise chosen. And so I think that's I always like to make sure people are recognizing that salespeople have a bad rap, right? A lot of times people say, oh, I'm not a salesperson. Salespeople manipulate, they are conniving, they force people to take something, to buy things, and they shouldn't. And that's not what we're doing. Our job as mediators is to help people find that resolution that works for them, that balances their competing needs, that they became receptive to. It is not to force an outcome. When we're wearing our arbitrator hat, we get to make that decision, but not as mediator. It is not our choice. All right, we tried to say
offering solutions.
Yes,
We're offering a solution to a particular need that. If I may add one more thing, because we have one more polling question and we didn't really address, but something that really deserves to be said is the notion and the idea of diversity. And how do we address it? Because the legal field, statistically speaking, is somewhat one-dimensional. Although it's changing, I can tell you, for example, looking at the latest ABA statistics, just off the top of my head, I think no more than 2.9% of all of the attorneys that are licensed in the United States are Hispanic women. Think about that. How many Hispanic women there are overall in the population? But only 2.3%. And how many of them actually do mediation? I'd say it's probably a lot less. For example, that's just for example. Yet you find yourself in a mediation where there are people with very, very different backgrounds. How does that work and in what context? One thing that I think that needs to be said, at least it needs to be stressed, is the idea of in communication mirroring the other person to gain credibility, because we can't change who we are, we can't change our backgrounds or anything, but we certainly can use an adaptive mode of communication where we mirror what we hear, so that people can get the sense that what they are saying is resonating with us, no matter who we are, no matter what background. And that's a tool that we could probably go into in a whole session by itself, but I would just mention that in the context of diversity. How do we address that situation? Well, mirroring is one key way. But we have a final polling question, right?
We do. We have a final polling question, and then we have tried to save, it looks like maybe 2 or 3 minutes to see if there's any questions or comments we wanted to chat about.
So
this
we're revisiting
question
another question.
is what we asked at the beginning, and we just thought we'd do some reality testing and see where people are at the end. All right, so at the beginning, the answers were yes, 76%, and now we're at 85%. It was 3% for no. Now we're at 12% for no, and it was 21% for undecided. Now we're 3% for undecided. So that's really interesting results.
I think we've done our job, Sylvia. That's deafening.
All right, so if you would like to close out of the poll, we did try to save just a minute or two in case there's any questions or information in the chat. As a reminder, our designated food banks are the San Antonio Food Bank and the Houston Food Bank. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I have not had an opportunity to look at what's in the chat, so I don't know if any of the other moderators have, if there's something there that we should focus on or any particular questions.
Yes, thank you. This was a fascinating and stimulating presentation, and I'm sure everybody learned a lot from it. I know I did. There are many questions or several comments in the chat regarding the question of undue manipulation and the infiltration of a mediator's personal biases. We all have different biases and orientations toward things. How do you draw the line? How do you know when you're pushing too hard or selling too hard and letting your own biases or views interfere with party autonomy? Can you comment quickly on that? We have just a minute.
I think it can be summed up in a way as exercise self-vigilance. You know, you have to be cognizant of the fact that we all have biases, but in the end, we can check them just by exercising, first of all, accepting the fact that we're human beings and we have that precondition, but then checking it because we're professionals, we're trained, and we're experienced in checking that. What do you think, Sylvia?
I agree. I think one of the things that is incumbent on us as mediators is to make sure we're doing some self-exploration on our unconscious biases, because the more you become aware, the more you can then be vigilant about trying to prevent what your unconscious bias might be. And then in terms of the first part of the question, how do we make sure we're not trying to manipulate an outcome? That it's integrity. You cannot, we are not an advocate We are not here to force a settlement or an outcome on the parties. That's not our job as a mediator. And so we have to exercise our ability to go back and forth between the two rooms with integrity, and make sure that what we're doing is helping the parties find a solution that works for them, not forcing the parties into a solution. I hope that answered the question.
Answers it very well. Thank you. With that, we're out of time. Aric Garza, Sylvia Mayer, thank you so much for a terrific presentation. We hope that people are able to contribute in support of the Houston Food Bank and the San Antonio Food Bank. We hope people are in a position to support those or food bank in their community if they're able to do so. Please let us know. We'll add it to our running total. And hopefully, Aric and Sylvia, we will make you the answer to that ultimate bar trivia question that will last for decades to come. Who were the speakers who put the Will Work for Food project above the $300,000 mark? We hope it's you. Thanks very much. On behalf of Natalie, Jean, Sarah, and myself, we appreciate this great presentation. We'll see you again next week. And with that, we are complete.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop that recording.